Hi, I'm Renee from the Bee and Bear Homestead. I don't know about you, but my garden is absolutely exploding with cucumbers right now. I have almost 15 in the fridge and even more on the vine. So today I'll be canning up some sweet pickle relish, and I'll make a tutorial to show you how you can do it yourself if you'd like to, and show you all the steps from start to finish. I hope it's helpful. Here are all the things we will need to can this sweet pickle relish. The recipe I'm using today is from the Better Homes and Gardens book, Can It. I like this recipe book. It has a lot of great canning recipes, and I do recommend following a tested recipe so that you know it has the right ratios of vinegar and heat to preserve your food safely. We have cucumbers, sweet peppers, onions from my garden. I'm using some pickling salt. I'll be using a mandolin to cut my pieces up in really small, even slices, and it saves some time. And then later, when I'm making the brine, I'll use apple cider vinegar, sugar, mustard seed, turmeric, and celery seeds. And of course, the first step to any canning recipe is to have washed your hands, washed your produce, and cleaned your surfaces carefully so that you can make sure you're canning in a sanitary environment. For this batch of sweet pickle relish, we need 6 cups of finely chopped cucumbers. And a way I make this go faster and have nice small slices is I use a mandolin. My food mandolin has a blade that can make small slices, but to make the slices be not just long skinny strips, but little squares like you see in relish, I carefully cut my cucumbers in the opposite direction as the blades of the mandolin while they are on my hand guard, and then you can just slide them across the mandolin. This works for all sorts of produce. I'll be cutting up my onions and peppers the same way. So here you can see the results. Really small pieces of cucumber cut up from that mandolin. And I actually remembered, I always seem to do this, that I like the size up blade. So I'm gonna switch it, but it's no problem. A few of the cucumber pieces will just be quite small. All right, I switched my mandolin blade to one that will make larger slices, and I'm gonna deepen my opposite direction cuts on my cucumber that is in my hand guard, and then can keep on making these tiny slices. When it gets about so big, you stop. I'll feed that to my chickens later. And now you can see I have smaller slices of cucumber. It's not perfect. See, these are a little bit long, so I might go through and chop those with a knife, but it is a faster way to make small slices of food if you're making something like relish. Of course, you might not have a food mandolin, and if you don't worry. Just cut up your cucumbers into small pieces. You can seed them. Some people scoop out the seeds from the center, and that way they don't have seeds in their relish. I usually don't unless it's a really big cucumber. But honestly, I try to avoid using the biggest cucumbers for preserving anyway because they get more bitter. That's also why I don't use the very ends of the cucumber, because it can be kind of bitter, and I prefer that to not be in my relish. So just chop up your pieces small if you don't have a food mandolin. And you want 6 cups of cucumbers. You'll want to add the onions and the peppers too, which I'll do next. This recipe calls for 3 cups onions with your relish. I like to use a food mandolin for onions too, especially if I have a big recipe. So you can do it the same like you did the cucumbers. You can put it in the hand guard. You put horizontal cuts in your onion in the opposite direction as your blades, and just run it through. And then you're left with just a little bit that you can chop up some more if you want. But it's so much nicer than just cutting. You need 3 cups of onions, and you know, it would make me cry to cut up 3 cups by hand, but you can get it done faster with a food mandolin, and usually I can avoid tears that way. All right, I've got 6 cups of cucumbers chopped up and 3 cups of onions, and the last thing is some bell peppers. These are ones I grew. You're supposed to have 3 cups of bell peppers or sweet peppers, and I don't know if I'll have a full 3 cups, but I didn't want to harvest the only other one I had growing in my garden right now. I wanted to save it. So if I don't have quite 3 cups of pepper, I'll just add a little bit more cucumber, because the 6 cups of cucumbers only used up 4 of my 15 cucumbers in the refrigerator. So I don't mind using a little extra cucumber. I have 6 cups cucumbers, 3 cups onions, and 3 cups bell pepper here in a non-metal bowl. It's just a big ceramic mixing bowl. And the next step is to add your pickling salt. So you're supposed to just sprinkle it over your vegetables, and I like to do it in bits and stir so it gets mixed in pretty well. Pickling salt is just salt without any other additives in it. So you don't want to use iodized salt. It can make your it can make it cloudy, and I think it can give it an off taste too, maybe especially if it's in your pantry for a while. I just always use pickling salt to play it safe. All right, I got my salt in. Next, you just add cool water to your vegetables. I'm gonna get a little bit more, but you wanna cover your vegetables in cool water, cover it, and let it sit for 2 hours. So here's my mixture of cucumbers, peppers, and onions, submerged in cool water with 1/4 cup of pickling salt. You're just supposed to cover it up and let it sit at room temperature for 2 hours to let that salt water solution do its work. It's been just about 2 hours since my pickles have been in the brine solution. So I'm gonna get started with the next step. I already got my jars ready. They've been washed and they're in a pot of hot water that I'll turn on to start getting ready to boil once I get the cucumbers in the sugar solution. But now I'm going to combine 3 cups sugar with 2 cups apple cider vinegar and some spices. So I have a 3/4 cup measuring cup there. So that was 3 cups of sugar, 2 cups of apple cider vinegar. Then I need a tablespoon of mustard seeds, whole mustard seeds. I'm just going to use what I've got left, which is not quite a tablespoon. 2 teaspoons of celery seed. And a 1/2 teaspoon of turmeric. And of course, turmeric is what gives the pickles their nice yellowy color. Smells good too. I have had it stain my countertop though, so you want to be careful with your solution when you're filling your jars. You're supposed to get this solution to boil so that it dissolves the sugar. And then we're going to add the vegetable mixture to the sugar after we've drained and rinsed it. And again, that's after it's been in the salt water solution for 2 full hours at room temperature. My 2-hour timer just went off for my cucumbers in their salt solution. So you're supposed to transfer the vegetables into a colander, set in your sink, drain off that salt water, and then rinse it in cold water. In the meantime, my solution of vinegar and sugar is coming to a boil over on the stove. So I'm going to let it come to a boil, let the sugar dissolve, and then we'll be adding these cucumber and vegetables into that sugar solution. My mixture of vinegar, sugar, and spices has come to a boil and all the sugar's dissolved. I turned on my pot of jars so that that water will start to get hot. And I'm adding in the cucumber mixture now. We have to let this return to boiling, and we're going to reduce the heat and let it simmer for 10 minutes. By doing that, you're just letting those flavors combine, and also you're sterilizing your food. You're making sure it's getting warm enough to kill any bad bacteria off of it. And of course, it'll be further sterilized when you can it in a boiling water bath. So we'll let this come back to a boil and simmer for 10 minutes before we get ready to can it. This has been 10 minutes of simmering, but I think there's more liquid in here than I would like. The instructions in the recipe say to let it simmer until most of the excess liquid has evaporated. So I'm gonna try 5 more minutes, see what that looks like. Now this has been simmering for 15 minutes. I'm gonna can it and call it good. I've had my jars simmering in hot water next to my relish, so they're ready to go. When you're boiling water bath canning, it's really important to keep everything hot and sterile. I've put a towel down next to my pot because I mentioned the turmeric, it can stain your counter. So I just put a clean towel down to protect my counter. So I use my jar lifter to take my hot jar out of the boiling water. I've got a nice funnel here to help get the relish into the jar. I'm gonna fill it up. Always check your recipe for how much head space you're supposed to allow. That means empty space at the top of your jar. This recipe calls for 1/2 inch head space. I'm eyeballing it and I think that I have too little. And you measure that using one of these handy devices. So each notch is 1/4 inch. So yes, I have too little head space. So I'm just gonna take some of the relish out using a clean spoon. Then you want to use a clean washcloth to wipe off your rim. The reason your jars may not seal is if the rim is chipped or dirty of your jar. And I'll tighten on the lid, this is just a clamp to allow you to touch the jar without touching it. Use my jar lifter and put it back in my boiling water. You can use half pints for this recipe or pints. I usually use pints just to use less lids, the only non-reusable part of a canning jar. Alright, so I filled that other one up. I'm going to test the headspace again, and again, not quite a ½ inch headspace, so I'll take a little bit out. Clean my lid, my rim of my jar, put on the lid, put on the ring, use my clamp to hold the jar, get the ring finger tight, and put it back in your hot water. I always keep a ½ pint, if I'm doing pints, I always prepare a ½ pint too. That way, in case I don't have enough food to fill up a full pint, I have a ½ pint ready to go and I can can that. Alright, I'm going to fill up the rest of my jars and we'll be back for the canning part. This recipe for me yielded 4 full pints of sweet pickle relish. Now, when you're doing boiling water bath canning, it's really important that you have 2 inches of water above the lid of your jar. And as you can see, I don't even have a ¼ inch over the lid of this jar. So I'm going to add some water to make sure I have 2 inches of water above my jar. When it comes to a full rolling boil after that, of course, I'll put a lid on. I will set a timer for 10 minutes. And when they've been boiling for 10 minutes, you're done. You can take them out. My 10-minute timer just went off, so I'll turn off my heat. And get the jars from the boiling water. I like to set them on a metal rack to cool. If you don't have a metal rack, you can also use a dish towel. All that's left now is to let these jars cool. You might have just caught a tiny ping of a sealing jar. So 2 of my jars, I heard the seal. If you don't hear the jar, and there was just another one. If you don't hear that little pop, that's a sign that your jar sealed. It's okay, but I always recommend letting your jars sit until they're completely cool. I usually leave them alone for about a day, and then after they've been cooled, I take the ring off. That's just the part that holds the lid on, and I lift up the jar just by the lid to make sure that seal is intact. If it's not a good seal, put it in the fridge and eat it quickly. If it is a good seal, your jar of fresh relish will last for a really long time. Maybe even a couple of years, although I wouldn't push it past 5 years or so. But it might be safe, who knows? Mine usually don't last that long. Thank you for watching this tutorial of how to can sweet pickle relish in a boiling water bath from start to finish. I hope it was useful to you. If you'd like to see some of my other canning tutorials, check out the channel. There's a whole bunch of content on this Bee and Bear Homestead channel, and subscribe for future updates. I'm always preserving in the summer months, so we'll be sure to update with more videos and more recipes as we go. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.